Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the latest edition of the opening bell. Thanks to Chris McKenna for stepping in last week. He was excellent. Really enjoyed that. But I'm back alongside Matt Christie as we delve into the latest headlines, fights, reviews, and previews in this mad, crazy, and unpredictable boxing world. Matt Christie, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, my friend. I'm very good. It's good to have you back, mate. I mean, we cope when you're not here, but it's not the same when you're not here. How was your break?
Lovely. Yeah, lovely. Pretty much just chilled out. Had a week out in Greece, in Kefalonia. Similar routine every day, mate. Get up, have a nice relaxed breakfast, go sit by the pool, read for pretty much all of the day in the sunshine with the little breaks for lunch and a drinky here and there. Then some late afternoon drinks, again by the pool, reading. And then maybe 6 to 7 o'clock, start thinking about getting ready, shower, change, go out for dinner. Maybe play a bit of cards when we get back to after that. Stroll along the beach, holding hands, star-crossed lovers, my wife and I, and then do it all again. Do it all again. I know since I've been away, this is for the benefit of those who are not watching on YouTube, available each and every week, as is all our content. But for those that are listening in audio, as I do, to be honest, I tend to listen to all my podcasts and stuff on audio as well. But Matt's office or recording place, there's been a pretty Spartan, largely empty bookshelf that might have been littered by the odd photo and maybe one or two books. There might have been a disheveled plant up there for several months as well. Now it is chock full, laden with boxing books aplenty. There they are. It looks magnificent. It looks absolutely magnificent. Well done to you.
Well done to my wife, I think, for really giving me the kick up the backside with that. It was driving her mad. I mean, we've been in this house now a month shy of 2 years, and it's taken me that long. She needed some space in the garage, and it got to a point then when she was bringing the books in via the garage, a box at a time, and saying, this one, this one, this one. And I'll be going yes or no, as in whether I was going to keep it or not. And then I was lugging them upstairs. But yeah, we managed to get it done on Sunday. It does look a lot better in here now. And it's really nice to have all the books so close to hand. There's an awful lot of them I've forgotten about. There's still quite a few here I haven't actually read. So yeah. Thank you for noticing, Alex.
Oh, it looks great. I mean, I'm the same. I've got my bookshelves behind. I've got a couple of my boxing hats behind me as well. So I've got the Triple G Gennady Golovkin baseball cap that I got when I went out in 2015 to see him fight Lemieux in New York City. So I bought a baseball cap. I remember when I've been to a couple of the Canelo fights, Canelo Cotto particularly, I think Canelo Golovkin won 2017. I bought a T-shirt when I was out that year, but they did have those Canelo No Boxing No Life baseball hats, and there was they had them in beautiful blue. You remember he went through a period where he was wearing blue T-shirt to go with his blue cap and everything, and I didn't buy one, and they've been quite hard to get hold of. I tried to buy one on the internet, and you see over my right ear, I'm just pointing to it now, Matt, but there is a No Boxing No Life Canelo hat, but I ordered it off the internet. It is absolute guff. He's such a knockoff cheapo. I asked them to take it back as a return, and they were just, it's so poor. They said to me, just keep it. So that's over my shoulder as well. And then I think I've got a green with yellow trim Kronk Detroit baseball cap as well. You might just see a couple of my sort of media credential up above me as well. I'm trying to see what that is. I can't see. Frampton Santa Cruz is one of them. Cotto Canelo, actually. So I just got framed some of my media lanyards I've just got them framed. I've got 6 of them, and I've obviously not chosen to put those in. I obviously thought 8 was too many. Anyway, I've just got it back from the frame, which looks magnificent. So that's going to go up on the wall as well. Right, we digress. Obviously, I was away while you and Chris were talking about Usyk Verhoeven. I enjoyed all of that. Chris actually made a lot of the points that I'd sort of noted down and written anyway. So it was really interesting to hear him make some of those points. I think it was really balanced and interesting as well. You've had a bit more time to reflect. Anything else that you sort of want to add to all of that?
Not really. I mean, I think given when and I said this last week, when you could see what you could see unfolding, there was a sense of disbelief, almost as a kind of a hardcore fan, a sense of panic that Alexander Usyk might go on to win the fight. I've watched bits and bobs of it since, actually. I think Usyk wasn't really at the races, but perhaps he wasn't as bad as we thought he was at the time. At the time, I didn't think the scorecards that Mike Coppinger was putting together for the television audience were right. I didn't think that Usyk had lost 8 out of the 9 completed rounds or whatever he was coming out with. I thought that was just way off even at the time. But I think ultimately Usyk got the job done, didn't he? He won the fight, and I think that's been forgotten a lot in all of the chat that's going on. And what I can say is kind of keeping an eye on things is that right up until last weekend, because ordinarily after a fight, into the Sunday, it's still hot news. Monday, Tuesday, it's starting to fade. Wednesday, you're starting to look forward to what's happening at the weekend. And you can see that in what people are looking at on social media and on websites. And I must say, right up until even Saturday morning, so a full week after the fight, Usyk Verhoeven was still the most read stuff.
That's interesting.
Because I was going a little bit back and forth with you in text. I was aware you were not watching the fight because you were on holiday. But since you've been back, you've obviously watched it. What's your perception of everything?
I think it was a perfect storm, really. Usyk probably overweight. It's difficult to sort of view him as being someone who was undermotivated, but the way he walked his way through sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, though that sort of midsection of the fight, that was the real worrying sign where he was just being outworked, really. Verhoeven obviously wasn't as bad as we thought he might be, and I think he had a bit of a funky style, didn't he? In terms of twitchy, jittery movement. I wouldn't say he had really good footwork. I would say he just had really unusual patterns that maybe were, I suppose, like I think Chris made the point actually, didn't he, about in the amateur scene where sometimes the really good amateurs would come in against someone who's hardly fought at all, doing pretty wacky and unusual things, and just found it really impossible to read. And I think there is some truth in that. I think the sheer funkiness of Verhoeven played its part, that sort of twitty, jittery style. I think his actual distance that he was operating at was quite good, generally. And there was a kind of constant movement, even although it was one-dimensional. He was constantly moving to his left, wasn't he? So he was there for the right hook, which Usyk tried and missed wildly with a few times early on. So I think Usyk was clearly overweight. He may have mentally not quite been at the races. And we've seen before in boxing, it underlines more than anything else how mental boxing is, how much of a sport is about mindset and the mind, that if you're not there properly right from the start, it's very difficult to get back on that track. So I think that played a part as well. There was just loads of different little ingredients that added up to a pretty messy, uncomfortable night for Usyk. And Verhoeven was winning rounds. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think Usyk needed to come from behind to win. The one thing that really did strike me regarding, the controversy, inverted commas, about the stoppage, I looked back on that several times and timed all of that particular sequence. And I think, although the bell does go maybe a second or two before maybe what would be deemed the official stoppage. I think you actually have to go back a little bit further to when he first went down, because I basically counted that by the second as best you could. And I think it's quite important to do that, because it then slightly negates away from how controversial that really is. Because I think because of the time that was taken to deliver and administer the count, because of the time that it was taken regarding the mouthpiece, I think if you add all of those up, there was still plenty of time for the stoppage. So I have absolutely zero problems with it, even although people are losing their minds about the bell went and he could have carried on so on and so forth. He went down with 23 seconds left on the clock, Matt. It took him 3 seconds to get back to his feet. So that's 20 seconds left in the fight. Now, it is about 9 seconds or so before that fight is resumed. That's another 11 seconds before they're fighting again. So he's had a count and a half before they go back to it. And then there's a gap and the clock disappears. So you have to count it yourself. And that is obviously imperfect, but you've got to count it yourself. With roughly 9 seconds left on the clock when the action's been resumed, he then stops that to go and put the mouthpiece back in. And that takes, by my reckoning, 11 seconds. There was only, between the action then being resumed and the referee stopping the fight, that's only 5 seconds. 5 seconds. So even if you took, bare minimum, there's 9 seconds left. He does it in 5. So it was still 4 seconds to go. And that's not even counting the 11 that it took them to put the gum shield back in. So by process of elimination, I've got zero problem with all of that. But I think ultimately, what we saw in terms of the performance and the action, I just think it was a kind of perfect storm of, and you touched on all of it last week, mindset, overweight, maybe slightly underprepared, maybe slightly surprised, maybe Verhoeven not quite as poor as we thought, maybe not as good as people are making out. And all of those things kind of met in the middle. And also the fact that you touched on, and Chris said it, the outlier is how much has Usyk got left? Where is he at? And my one frustration with all of this is that because of this performance, because of Ngannou in the fight against Fury, because of the perception that Conor McGregor did better than he really did against Mayweather, who, let's be frank, carried him for as long as he wanted. Because of those three sort of big highlight, showcase performances, inverted commas, is that the real truth about these kind of fights is Joshua absolutely nonchalantly slamming Francis Ngannou. I think that's closer to the truth about these kind of fights. But because we have the other three, unfortunately, we have got absolutely no truth and no context. And therefore, people are inclined to believe that the other three are closer to the truth. And there was a brilliant line regarding that from Barry Jones at the end, where he said, "It breaks my heart to say it, but these crossover fights, they might sort of worked." And Barry kind of feeding into that idea that those three examples I've given are kind of closer to the truth. I think Joshua against Ngannou is what should and can happen. But we've got the other three, Matt, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you kind of don't want to be too much of a smart ass about it. And like, as I said last week, I wrote a really damning preview for Boxing Scene about the Usyk Verhoeven fight. And just that this doesn't happen. You do not get someone that hasn't had a professional fight in 12 years, and that professional fight was at a really low level, come into the sport and beat someone like Alexander Usyk. And then Verhoeven does really well. I think it's worthwhile looking at the Anthony Joshua Francis Ngannou fight, because what these guys have to deal with, as in Mayweather to a lesser degree, but most certainly Tyson Fury and then Alexander Usyk, is a fighter they've never seen before. They've got no evidence to draw from. All of a sudden, Anthony Joshua has the evidence. He can see 10 rounds of what Francis Ngannou does, what he does well, what he doesn't do well, and he knows exactly what he's got to do. I think if they do make a rematch with Alexander Usyk and Rico Verhoeven, it's going to be a completely different fight because Alexander Usyk is going to have an awful lot more stuff to draw from. Whereas Verhoeven and Peter Fury had a whole career of Alexander Usyk to look at and craft a game plan. They had absolutely nothing, really. And I'm not kind of excusing Alexander Usyk's performance for that, but I think, as you say, and as Chris said last week, just this kind of completely alien kind of boxing style that you're being presented with is causing certain problems. And I also think, particularly with Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury, and even Floyd Mayweather, none of those are one-punch knockout artists. Whereas you go in with someone like a Joshua, who can hit like hell, and the fight's all over. But Verhoeven did the rounds last week. He was speaking to all sorts of people. He had this massive media day in and around London. I think he did about 50 interviews. He was across about 11 hours. But he was saying, yeah, you can expect now to see more people coming over into boxing. There's some really good fighters over in kickboxing. They'll come in and they can have a go at it as well. Verhoeven kind of really dining out on it. And I don't blame him. This is his moment in the sun. And he's kind of saying, look, I'm here to stay. I'll fight anybody. I'll fight Moses Atoma. I'll fight Ajit Kabayal if I have to. I'll fight Alexander Usyk. I think if he does go in with anyone, that people will now have an understanding of that style that he's got and probably will be able to counteract it.
Yeah, it's a really good point about the sort of experience or the unknown that playing a part. That's a very good one. What it does underline also, if you've got people like Verhoeven now saying, "Oh well, I can do that, so you can do that, so they can do that," it underlines what a Pandora's box the WBC and the other sanctioning bodies have opened by sanctioning a bout like this. Because if he can come over, why can he do it? Why can he fight for the world title, but you won't allow him to become world champion? So what about everyone else? What about the current champion in K1 or the current top three in K1 or whatever? They're not allowed to come over, but he is. I mean, what an absolute utter nonsense it is and was. A total and utter nonsense. And Maurizio, as well as sanctioning the bout, sanctioning a belt, King of the Nile. I mean, he's the same nonsense over and over again. It is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. But they're more scared of being on the outside of the fence than being on the inside. And so they'd rather shake hands with the nonsense and be on the inside. And that is the truth of it. He doesn't deserve a rematch. As well as he fought, as in context, as good as he was, he should have been allowed to have the fight in the first place, as Chris said. So, no, he shouldn't be anywhere near a rematch. And it just makes an absolute mockery of the boxing lives of the Ajit Kabayals of this world. Yes, there will always be, say, Jack Catterall taking step-aside money for Ramirez and Josh Taylor to fight. You'll always have incidents like that. That's gone back in history with your Lennox Lewis's of this world once upon a time as well. But that's not what this is. And it makes a mockery of their boxing journeys and their boxing lives and the efforts that they make in the ring. It makes an absolute mockery of all of that. Let's stick to the heavyweights, Matt, because Anthony Joshua was ringside out in Egypt for the Usyk fight. Wonder what he would have made of all of that. He's had the presser for his own fight in recent days. What do you make of the mood, the words, the outwardness of Joshua at this stage of his life?
He seems to be re-energized in a way that I wasn't expecting to see. And I know I was only watching on a screen and I was watching a press conference and he's supposed to say all of the right things, but there was almost an excitement from him to get back in the ring. There was almost a desire to kind of do the memory of two of his best friends proud. He said behind the scenes afterwards that he wants to make sure that they live on, and he wants to make sure that the parents of his friends are kind of looked after, and this is his focus now. Kristian Prenga, really kind of an unknown box of tricks. I was speaking to someone recently in this country who were talking about Prenga's punching power, and I spoke to someone out in America who's seen him in the gym and says he does hit exceptionally hard, but he's crude. He will not be on the level of Joshua skill-wise, but there is always that danger that if Joshua is over keen, and I keep hearing people say all Joshua's got to do is get back to being the destroyer of old, and it's as simple as that, and the whole of the heavyweight division will fall at his feet. He simply can't do that anymore at his age. I mean, he probably could, but his reactions are not going to be what they were when he was in his 20s. And I think he'd be a recipe for disaster if he just comes out all guns blazing for every fight. He'd probably get away with it against Kristian Prenga. But I do think there's an element of danger there, and people might scoff at that, saying that Prenga's kind of been handpicked. And he probably has. In fact, he certainly has. Eddie Hearn said it. He said he needed someone that would come with ambition, but that hopefully won't beat Joshua, and who'll make Joshua look good along the way. There is always this danger with any fighter at this stage of their career. And what we won't know with Joshua is how he will feel when he is standing alone in the ring with only his opponent for company, when everyone else has moved away. But Joshua appears to have trimmed down his team, and is saying all the right things in regard to where he wants to go. He wants Prenga, then he wants Fury, and then he wants a world title shot beginning of next year. Whether that will all fall into place for him, it's a very, very different heavyweight division to the one that he terrorised when he was beating the likes of Charles Martin 10 years ago. There's people like Moses Atoma there. There's people like Ajit Kabayel there. Alexander Usyk is still hanging around. He's still got to get past Tyson Fury. He's still got to get past Prenga, frankly. It would be, and old Mr. Hyperbole Eddie Hearn is saying this is already one of the greatest comeback in sports, because of the fact that he's come back after the car crash so soon, after the psychological and physical injury and the harm. And I'm not denying that was an almighty mountain that he just had to climb. But I think there will be some legitimacy to that statement if he does walk through Prenga and then does a job on Tyson Fury. That would be an incredible comeback for Anthony Joshua. But his head does appear to be in the right place. And I say this because I look back on his fight. First thing that comes to mind is before he fought Joseph Parker. He was still unbeaten then, but he didn't seem right. I remember him before he fought Andy Ruiz, most definitely not right. And then after the loss to Andy Ruiz and some of the fights that he's had, kind of losing his temper with Daniel Dubois, he does seem to be in as good a place as I've seen him for quite some time, which might well be bad news for the rest of the division.
Those that think that Joshua, and we hinted at it a few years ago in the pod as well, so we've got to hold our hands up. Those that think that Joshua just has to go back to that front foot jab right hand destroyer would be well to remind themselves about why it was that Joshua got knocked out by Daniel Dubois last time. And that is an overeagerness, a misreading of a situation where he had Dubois stung, hurt, and on the back foot, but that overeagerness walked him onto a right hand. So it's not always as straightforward and as simple as that.
No, it's not. And I think that you also need to understand, and I'm sure people do. I mean, I don't want to be kind of insulting people's intelligence, but there's the point when that all stopped, really, that kind of motoring forward and take my opponent's head off, was in the Vladimir Klitschko fight, where he did go motoring forward. He did drop Vladimir Klitschko in the 5th round, and then he found himself in trouble, deep trouble by the end of that 5th round, and then was dropped himself in the 6th. He was careless against Andy Ruiz in the 3rd round. He dropped Andy Ruiz with a peach of a shot, walked in thinking all he had to do was land another one, and he got caught himself. So there are reasons why he doesn't do what he used to do. And yeah, we were saying that, but it was a few years ago. I don't recall saying it recently.
So Joshua against Prenga, who, when this fight was announced and Prenga was announced as the opponent, Ludabella, who would know perhaps more than us on this side of the Atlantic, was fairly outspoken regarding Prenga, who he was describing pretty much as a doorman, as a nightclub bouncer, and a pretty shambolic opponent for someone like Joshua. So there was deep criticism of the match when it was made. There's your context in the eyes of some regarding the type of opponent. But maybe it's not Prenga that Joshua is fighting here. Maybe Joshua is fighting something else entirely. His own mindset, his own philosophies, his own desires, his own wants about where it is that he is right now. And maybe he's also fighting time. Plenty at play for Joshua's return. And in truth, Tyson Fury is probably fighting many of the same things. Outwardly, Fury might be more bombastic and less willing to admit, but there's probably similar things at play at a similar stage in both of their careers. And Tyson Fury's going to come back on that Pierce O'Leary, Mark Chamberlain bill in Dublin on August the 1st. That's probably quite a good fit for Fury, although the outlier is, of course, Fury and Joshua supposed to fight again, and banana skins in their paths along the way.
Yeah, which is why you can't kind of get too carried away with this whole Joshua Fury chat. I know that contracts have been signed. They've never got that far before. But both of them have got to win a fight, haven't they? Before that happens, both of them have to win a fight and then feel like they want to continue with boxing after that. Tyson Fury, yes, is supposed to be fighting on August the 1st in Dublin. He announced it himself on social media last week. And then yesterday, it wasn't quite all signed and sealed that is the case, is what I was hearing yesterday, that it will be August the 1st. But I think they are trying to get that over the line, and if they can, it should be announced this week. Who's Fury going to fight? You know, his manager Spencer Brown was kind of playing with the media a little bit and saying names like Jarrell Miller and Andy Ruiz. It would be insane to choose Andy Ruiz, frankly, for Tyson Fury, if the point of the exercise is get a few more rounds in the bank and win. You don't want the jeopardy of Andy Ruiz, but what a story it would have been if Andy Ruiz was to upset the apple cart again, but it won't be Andy Ruiz, folks. Although that would be a terrific fight, I must say. I'd like to see it.
Yeah. My goodness me. Yeah. Great for the story writers and for the media, but maybe less so for everyone else involved. So that's how the heavyweight division is shaping up over the next month or so. We had Dmitry Bivol back from a long absence and pretty much outclassing all the way from start to finish Eifert on something of a homecoming. It was kind of one of those performances that we've come to expect, to a certain extent enjoy, Matt, but it probably stretched the latter for some more bloodthirsty boxing fans.
Yeah, I mean, it was, as I said earlier, kind of when you're looking round and you're seeing what people are reading, what they're engaging with, what they're discussing, nobody was talking about Dmitry Bivol. Nobody was talking about Dmitry Bivol, even on the Saturday. Now, whether that's because the fight was out in Russia, whether that's because Michael Eifert was just another personification of the ludicrous of the sanctioning bodies. What has this guy done to earn a shot at one of the best athletes in the sport? Well, he'd beaten aging Jean Pascal a couple of years ago, but other than that, he'd done nothing, and he showed so little ambition. Bivol, I thought, was punch perfect. Didn't set the world on fire, however, but Michael Eifert showed very, very little ambition. did nothing to justify his place in that fight, did nothing to show everybody that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and I'm going to go for it. He lasted the distance against Bivol. Bivol now and again threatened to really go for it. But Bivol's always so comfortable in situations like that. And he just got the job done and he won every round. Quite what I think a couple of the judges gave Eifert a couple of rounds. Goodness knows what rounds they were. But Bivol, one hopes now that he gets an opponent who is befitting of his talents, and it's on a stage that's befitting of his talents. This guy is the only man to beat Artur Beterbiev as a professional. He also has an upset win over Saul Canelo Alvarez on his record. But still, Bivol is really struggling for liftoff. Unfortunately, Michael Eifert was never ever going to be the required launchpad.
No. But Bivol has got those names on his record. He was brilliant, wasn't he, against Canelo? He's had the big money fight, so I suspect he's made plenty already. So maybe he'll be satisfied by that. And it sort of underlines why there is a difference and there is a link between fan power, pulling power, the box office, and ultimately the position in the sport and the bank balance and the big bucks. Those things are inextricably linked. And Bivol is never going to make that jump. He's just never going to do it. No.
And as an aside, I mean, we kind of attacking the sanctioning bodies. So this was for the IBF light heavyweight title. The WBO actually came out and said, we can't sanction this. We can't sanction this. But the interesting thing that has developed over the last week is that the IBF and the WBO have announced that they're coming together in December this year it's only to host a convention together. But the whole point is that they're going to start working together with a view to being stronger together rather than as they would be independently. And one of the things that they said is there's a lot of challenges going on in the sport at the moment. One of those being the emerging rise of Zuffa boxing. So whether those two are going to get together and become something quite big between them, or if they're all just going to get together at a conference and slap each other's back, I don't know. But I think it's an interesting development. It's the first sign, really, that the sanctioning bodies are waking up to the threat to their dominance that is Zuffa boxing. Because we hear overnight Zuffa have signed, or on their own brink of signing, Shakur Stevenson. They're coming. They're coming, whether people like it or not. They're making steps, and they're making sizable steps.
Yes, indeed, and that's probably one of the reasons why you get the sanctioning bodies attaching themselves to Usyk against Rico, isn't it? That's why. It's the fear of maybe not maintaining those relationships, the fear of being on the outside looking in. That's part of it. But then you also get the truth of their systems, that you get Alan Begic in against Hamza Shiraz. How? Why? Well, we saw what can happen, how dangerous it is when someone doesn't have the right skills against someone who's much better than them. And Eifert, although he didn't get hurt, that was largely because of the way he boxed and because Bivol is a boxer, and so is he. So he was able to navigate that through his own sort of relative boxing skills. But you've seen, again, Eifert just shouldn't be in the same ring as Bivol, shouldn't be anywhere near breathing the same air as him. Let's be honest about it. So you've seen the worst. So yeah, how much the Shakur situation, is that pretty much a done deal?
I know Lance Pugmire spoke to a couple of people overnight and said that, because Eddie Hearn kind of announced it behind the scenes at yesterday's Anthony Joshua press conference, and took the opportunity to say something like, well, they're going to pay him big money, but who on earth are they going to match him with? I think that's a really good point. But yeah, as far as we're aware, it does look like that is now, it's pretty much done. It is just a case of announcing it. So we can probably expect that at some point this week. And of course, who will they match him with? That's the difficult thing. But I hear what Eddie Hearn is saying, because we have seen this kind of thing before with PBC, where all of a sudden a lot of fighters are all going onto one platform. And that didn't really work out for PBC in the end. And I also understand that Eddie Hearn will be thinking, oh no, another one. That's another big name that's gone over there. They've got to start somewhere, haven't they? I think what we need to see from them is that structure that they promised. Otherwise, it's just another promotional juggernaut that for however long has got cash on the hip, and they will keep making these statement signings. But what we haven't seen is anything that is going to change the face of boxing. They're saying they don't want the sanctioning bodies anymore, but okay, what's your alternative? How do you plan to present something better than we've already got? For me, that is the most important thing. It's more important than the star signings. Once you have that in place, then you bring the star signings into the system that you've developed. But at the moment, there doesn't appear to be any system that's any different to what we've already got. At the moment, and I'm not saying it won't develop and grow and evolve, but at the moment, all we've got is another championship. And that's the Zuffa Championship. So we wait and see. One presumes it's in its infancy. Wouldn't be a surprise if the wheels fell off next week. But one presumes it's in its infancy, and it is growing, and it will evolve into something that can feasibly stand there and say, look, this is the new way of doing things. This is the new order. Come and join us. At the moment, I'm not seeing that.
Well, we'll be talking about the first British Zuffa show coming up on Saturday, previewing Chris Billam-Smith against Ryan Rozicki. That could be a cracker of a fight as it happens, by the way. Yeah. That could be an absolute hellfire fight. Quick word on Adam Azim, who monstered Steve Claggett in a manner that others, including the likes of Tio Lopez, hadn't been able to do previously. So that was a terrific effort from Azim. And I mean, the power punching, the sharpness of it, the technique, even the fighting in and around the pocket inside was quite good. Remember, Amir Khan never learned that language, did he? Could never fight in and around the pocket, just didn't know what to do. But Azim has got the angles and the moves, the speed and the power, and the way he beat up and battered Steve Claggett in pretty short shrift time, Matt, was even allowing for the fact that the Claggett's in advancing years and away from home and maybe not what he was, all of those things at play for sure, maybe slightly exaggerating the effect. Nonetheless, pretty impressive in a short space of time.
Exceptionally impressive from Adam Azim. You're kind of waiting now for what comes next. He's cleared this stage. I think we use that expression quite a lot, but he has cleared this stage now. Shane McGuigan said beforehand that they were looking around for an opponent that could give him a few more rounds, teach him a few different things, but this would be the last stop at this level, and then the leash will come off. And we'll wait and see. Azim has done pretty much everything right throughout his career. There's been criticism now and again when he's been forced to go the distance, but he's also been battling injuries. And if ever a kid ate, slept and breathed boxing, it's this one. I mean, I remember speaking to him, I think after his second fight or whatever, and he said he carried around a notepad. And every time he'd sit and he'd be watching boxing and he would make notes on what Floyd Mayweather was doing. He'd make notes on what Alexander Usyk was doing. Oh, that was great. That was great. Then he'd take his notepad into the gym and just constantly trying to get better. And he's coming out of his shell a little bit more as well. You can see and sense the confidence that is within him. There's a little bit more feeling within him that he belongs now. He belongs in this crazy ass boxing world. And he's most certainly one to watch. I think a lot of people already are aware of him. But I just hope now, then the McGuigans have a history of building fighters and letting them loose at exactly the right time. And one suspects they may well do that with Adam Azim.
Yeah, that is true. However, if you're going to look at probably their best project, Josh Taylor, maybe you'd include Frampton in that as well. But when you think of Josh Taylor in particular, they matched Taylor quite hard in little short spells, didn't they? And it's a different approach to that. You've got, in fact, it's miles away from that approach with Azim. You've got to say now, timing and niggles and opponents falling out. There's been a bit of that at play, Matt, but it's a very different. It's a more cautious approach with Azim so far.
And it had to be, and it simply had to be. Adam Azim didn't have the amateur background that Josh Taylor had. Josh Taylor had the grounding kind of at the highest level in international amateur boxing. That Adam Azim didn't have that. He was a bit of a wunderkind who came along and was just full of potential, and he'd won youth titles and he'd won this and he'd won that, but he didn't go the conventional route. He kind of turned professional before he'd had that kind of senior experience at amateur level. So I think they had to kind of take their time with him more so than they did with Josh Taylor. I suppose my point is that with they will be acutely aware of when to move the fighter, and now I think they're all in agreement that now is the time to let Adam Azim loose at the highest level.
And that's a good point, because it's got to be horses for courses. You can't just have a method, a philosophy, and a plan that's the same for every fighter. I mean, that makes absolutely zero sense. So, yeah, it's got to be horses for courses. You've got to cut your cloth according to what it is that you've got in terms of the raw material. So that makes sense. But plenty of people will feel that now let's crank up a gear with Adam Azim. And finally, just a quick word on Amanda Serrano, who made her own sort of bit of personal history, which I think was quite important to her as well, with her 30-second career knockout, equaling Christy Martin. Now, they have fought in different generations at very different levels as well. So like for like is worthless in this instance. But I know that's a milestone that Serrano has kind of targeted even at the age of 37, and you suspect she'll be looking to push on past that.
And she just went for it. The opportunity arose in the second round. Amanda Serrano put her foot down and got the stoppage. She convinced the referee that her opponent couldn't continue. But you know what was the most striking thing about that? It was Amanda Serrano's ring walk. And just the joy of that she was about to have another fight, the joy that she's still doing it. I think there's certain people that will be saying, look, Amanda, you have had a heck of a career. You've had the fights with Katie Taylor. There's been going up and down in weight. There's collecting belts for fun. Along the way, there's been hard fights. You're closer to 40 than you are to 30. At some point, you're going to have to say goodbye, but you could just tell she made her way to the ring. That isn't going to happen anytime soon.
Let's talk about the action coming up this weekend. Chris Billam-Smith back in Bournemouth on Sky, fighting Ryan Rozicki, the Canadian who's only lost once. And that was to Oscar Rivas when he moved up in weight and spotted him nearly 20 pounds in the process. And he fought valiantly and on even terms for much of that fight as well against the bigger man. He is a fan-friendly fighter, this Rozicki. I think there's a sort of 25, 26-minute sort of career montage over on YouTube if you want to go and just get a sort of potted history of him, Matt. But you look through some of his fights, I mean, he is so easy to hit, particularly in the pocket, particularly with the jab. You can catch him square. He can be bloodied and marked up, but he will throw with you. And in a way, he and Billam-Smith are very similar types. Just Billam-Smith is so far a better type and has fought at a much, much higher level. But this Rozicki, he's gonna make it a fight. Don't have any real sense whether he's quite good enough, Matt. But if CBS isn't switched on, he could get absolutely sucked into an all-out war. And to be honest, I think it'll probably be that anyway.
I predict that this will be a grueling all-out war. Rozicki is kind of the old-school pressure fighter, head down, bowl them over, and just keep wailing away until the opponent submits. But there is a danger that when he steps up in class, which he will be with Chris Billam-Smith, is that he'll lose. His only loss on his career was kind of in a excursion to heavyweight when he weighed 203 pounds and lost to Oscar Rivas, who people remember from fighting Dillian White. And he gave away about 20 pounds in weight. That was back in 2021. Didn't disgrace himself there. Lost kind of 8 rounds to 4 across the board on a unanimous decision. I sat next to Ryan Rozicki out in Bangkok at the WBC convention in December, and Rozicki was out there kind of lobbying for his shot at the, I don't know if it was the cruiserweight or the bridgeweight. I think it was cruiserweight title, because he'd been sitting at number 1 for quite a while, and he was like, well, what do I have to do? He subsequently said, because he was brushed off with, okay, well, this has got to happen and then you'll get your shot after that. And he said, I'm done with all of that nonsense now, and I'm moving over to Zuffa, where I know I'll be able to get good fights and they'll just be made for me. He's as many boxers are, a terrifying presence. When you kind of say, he looks like one of those blokes that you just be like, well, okay, no, I won't look you in the eye. But we had a really good chat, and I was writing something while I was out in Bangkok. I was writing something about the dangers of sparring, and because he was there, I asked if I could speak to him afterwards, and we're just talking about the amount of sparring that he does. And he says, on average, I'm doing like 10 rounds a day for 5 weeks or whatever. And then I worked it out for him and said, well, you do realise that means you're doing this many rounds of sparring for every fight. You've had this many fights, so you might well have done that many rounds of sparring. And he went, goodness me. I said, well, it's a good job I'm not any good at maths then. And he was kind of joking about it, but he will be so up for this. He feels like he's been waiting for this shot. I know it's not a title shot, sorry, but an opportunity like this.
Yeah, he'll give it all. And that's the way he fights anyway. I'll tell you what, Matt, as well as all of that sparring, as well as the pretty hard fights that he's been in pretty much from the moment he turned pro, you go back and look at some of his amateur footage again as well, where for periods he was fighting the bigger size heavyweights. He's been in those pretty much since he's been boxing. That there is wear and tear and damage, no doubt about it. He marks up heavily. I fancy Chris Billam-Smith will just be a bit too big, strong, good, seasoned, experienced, and just better. But if there's any, Billam-Smith's got his one eye on the exit door, I think it's fair to say. Very much conscious of his family, where he's at in his career. Hence the move to Zuffa and boxing. It's looking, this fight, or Pattaya, is looking probably the direction. But if there's any room there for doubt and an opponent to sow that seed, then it's all there. The ingredients are there. I don't think Rozicki's quite good enough. I think he's too easy to head. I think it's too big a jump up. But he's got the minerals and he will bring it. And he is quite fast with those counter shots in the pocket. And it's going to be fought in the pocket. Billam-Smith just needs to be sharp and switched on, Matt, because this could otherwise be a pretty long, tough, uncomfortable night for both of them.
Yeah, it could be. And I think that's my kind of biggest concern really with Billam-Smith at this stage of his career, is that there's long been an awareness that the sport that he's in will do him damage the longer he stays in it. He is wonderful company. And he's had some difficult fights over the last few years, grueling fights over the last few years. He's got a young family that are kind of growing up around him, that he's having to miss some really precious moments because he's off in training camp. So I do believe that, he is plotting his exit from this brutal trade. But then you look at who he has fought, Chris Billam-Smith, since 2023, when he challenged Lawrence Okoli in Bournemouth on that night where we were both there, and we spent a bit of time with Chris beforehand. Then there was Masternak Riakporhe, Zurdo Ramirez and Brandon Glanton. That's levels above where his opponent, Rozicki, has been operating, and I think that will prove the difference.
It is, but he's tough. I mean, I watched that fight against Oscar Rivas, and, he is tough, and Rivas is a big lump of bridgerweight these days, really. And we saw how competitive and good he was against Dillian White. So that's just the red herring that stops me from absolutely all in saying you are right here. That's just the one thing that he has proven himself in a tough spot before. But it could just be Billam-Smith's just a bit too good, a bit too strong and big, and actually wears him out in sort of 5 or 6 rounds. It's quite possible, but could get ugly. This could get ugly and long.
It could, and it could catch fire, but it's only scheduled for 10, so it's not gonna be a 12-round fight. But I think a sensible pick is Billam-Smith on points.
Okay, Billam-Smith on points. I think if you're looking for a bet at the weekend, the fight to concentrate on is Jack Massey against Chev Clark, because it's more or less 50-50, sort of 5 to 6 even money, thereabouts. So it's almost a pick 'em, and it is just an argue your case. I think if Massey turns up in the same mood as he did the night against Isaac Chamberlain, then I'd absolutely fancy Massey to get the job done here, probably on points. But, Chev Clark, he's busy, he'll be competitive. He might just do a bit more in many of those rounds. So I can see why the judges would lean towards him in some of those tighter spots. But I'd lean towards Massey at 5 to 6 as being sort of the bet of the weekend in what I think is the fight to bet on if you're looking for a bet, because all of the odds are closer to being sort of attractively priced.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Massey on points for me on this one. And I think it'll be close. I think it'll be fairly close. 97, 93, 96, 94, that kind of fight. But yeah, I'd go with Massey, but at the same time I wouldn't write Clark off.
Fancy Josh Padley to defend his European title?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
Yep.
I think he'll do. I mean, fair play to Matchroom for going ahead with that, Bill. Goodness me. I mean, it was supposed to be Dalton Smith. That dropped out. Then it was supposed to be Yafai. That dropped out. And they've just elevated Josh Padley to main event, and everybody else that's on the card will get the payday. And that is, Eddie Hearn has his critics, but he will always do everything he possibly can to keep his fighters active and to make sure they get paid when they're expecting to get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fair point regarding that. Big thanks to the Patreon's Apple Plus subscribers for your continued support. It really is, alongside NAS Medical, is the only reason we can do the pod week to week. And further support, if you want to help us, then you can do by signing up to Apple Plus, or indeed to Patreon as well. Less than $5 a month to support the Opening Bell each and every week. And we really do love and appreciate you. And thanks to NAS Medical. They're the leading independent experts in ringside medical care. They provide global medical coverage for professional and amateur boxing events. Also ringside medicine training and basic life support accredited courses. Boxer safety is their priority. You can find them at nasmedical.co.uk. Thanks to Neil and the team again for their continued support as we roll on to this week. And this week, we take you back to the 1st of June, 1991. Palm Springs, an HBO appearance for terrible Terry Norris taking on the once mighty and previously brilliant Donald Curry. How the mighty had fallen, Matt. Amazing to think that in just sort of 4 or 5 years, Donald Curry had gone from being pound for pound one of the best to suddenly seeming quite vulnerable. And Terry Norris on a bit of a tear.
Terry Norris was on a bit of a tear. Two of my favourite fighters from this era. They kind of crossed eras, didn't they? Curry was on the way down while Norris was on the way up. But two wonderful fighters. I enjoyed the little feature with Terry Norris at the start of the broadcast. Bit cheesy, but he's just like, kind of opens it up with, "I bet you don't know who I am, do you?" And then ends with him clutching his WBC belt, and he's like, "I'm never going to leave the ring without it." Great Great little line there. Great little line. But Terry Norris, of course, had come into some prominence. People did know who he was. He'd ended the career of Sugar Ray Leonard, or so we thought. Leonard would actually come back, wouldn't he, and fight Hector Camacho. And then he goes into this one against Donald Curry, who's also thought to be kind of past his best, and he definitely was. He'd had an excursion up to middleweight where he'd lost to Michael Nunn in the fight prior to this one. He'd had the loss to Lloyd O'Hoonigan 4 or 5 years before this. Then there was the loss to Mike McCallum, and then there was a shocking loss to René Jacot over in France, where he'd lost the final world title that he won. But Curry gives this a go. I thought he was. There were flashes of the old Donald Curry. Norris largely in control, but this is a more competitive fight than I remembered it being from back in the day. What about you?
Yeah, very much so. I think actually, the first sort of couple of rounds, it seems obvious that Curry's on the slide. You can see him getting into positions. He tries to get on the front foot, but he's boxing out of this strange sort of high guard press crouch, and every time he gets into position, you can see he just can't get off. He just can't let his hands go. And the moments where I think a few years ago there would have been opportunities, now they just seem like blind alleys and dead ends. But actually, from sort of the fifth round on, it does look like Curry's getting the better of it, and he's winning rounds. And he's constantly having big moments, and yet it only seems like it needs one reply, one little dent in the confidence to puncture him, and suddenly he's on the back foot again, and suddenly he's looking vulnerable. So it's a strange one to watch regarding Curry, because I think you look at the result, you look at the stages of their careers, and it's easy just to assume that, you know, Donald Curry gets rolled over here, but that's actually not the case, Matt, is it?
No, he has a real good go, like you say, rounds 5, 6, 7, even into the 8th. He's still in it, but he had that at this stage of his career. He kind of had that almost. He was delicate. You were always concerned he was about to go. Donald Curry. I don't know what planet George Foreman was on for this particular.
Yes.
For this particular broadcast. Now and again, George Foreman was great, but I remember at the time, and I think I've said this before, I remember at the time in the American boxing magazines, like your KOs, your World Boxings, your Boxing 91s or whatever, George Foreman was constantly getting stick, and I suspect he got an awful lot of stick after this one. I couldn't follow what he was saying. There's one point where he's like, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, and he said, "There's an old saying that when you get hit by a right hand, 3 doors open up. And if you're too hungry for one of the doors, you're not going to be allowed in." And I'm like, what is he on about?
Yeah. There's an old saying by Confucius that if you eat strawberries, you will see the future. Yeah, come on. Okay, George. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, he's not particularly present in this. And at the end, he says, Norris is on his way to greatness now on the back of this win over Donald Curry. I suppose on paper, you can understand the point that was being made, you know, beating one of the former best. It's just amazing to think that, you know, it's 86, 87 when Curry was losing to Hoonigan McCallum. So you've got to go back to sort of early to mid 80s really for the best of Donald Curry. But that's why the Hoonigan defeat was such big news, Matt. No one could have imagined Donald Curry losing, never mind losing in that way back at that particular stage of his career, which is testament to how highly regarded he was. And I think they say it in HBO commentary, don't they, about sort of seeing Curry earlier on in his career and what a striking impression it made on them.
Yeah, and at one point they kind of bring up the finish of Milton McCrory, don't they? And I think they said that was 6 years ago. And if you think about now, 2026, and what was happening in 2020 and what have you, or 2021, it was a rapid fall from grace for Donald Curry. And there was the loss to Lloyd Honeyghan, obviously, which is constantly referenced every single time a British fighter goes off to is an underdog and they're fighting an underdog in a foreign country. Can this man do what Lloyd Honeyghan did? But for me, I thought he was boxing beautifully against Mike McCallum. I really did. And I think that was the fight that ended the Donald Curry as we know it, because he looked like he was going to go on and win that fight. He'd hurt Mike McCallum. He'd wobbled Mike McCallum in a way that he'd never been wobbled before or was since. Boxing beautifully, got careless for a moment and walks into one of the most famous one-punch knockout defeats in history. And after that, he was simply never the same again. But I don't necessarily think it was the Honeyghan defeat that stripped him of all his magic. I think it was the Mike McCallum loss that was more damaging for him. But he certainly had ambition here. You almost sensed as well that he was aware that he wasn't the fighter he was anymore. He was aware that this might be his last fight. And it was, to all intents and purposes. He didn't fight again after this for about 7 years. He made an ill-advised comeback in the late 1990s, which didn't end well. But he kind of gave it his all. And something else I thought with this fight, which is glaring, which isn't picked up at all by anyone on the commentary, is the end of the fight where Curry is on his knees and Terry Norris just takes a sweet free shot to the back of his head. And there is no mention of that. And he did that against Sugar Ray Leonard, and he would do it later on in his career when he had that ridiculous series with Luis Santana when he kept getting disqualified. He was a dirty devil, old Terry Norris, in the ring. He really was, and he really struggled to kind of contain that. But, you know, you kind of laugh a little bit at George Foreman saying he's on his way to greatness. He was. He's one of the greatest 154-pound fighters in history, Terry Norris. And he went on a heck of a run after this. And I don't think he ever left the junior middleweight division. There was often talk. I remember at the time there was talk about could he get down to 147, and there was talk about him moving up to 160. And he stayed in the division where he felt he was at his best pretty much for his entire career after this.
Yeah, you could argue Big George absolutely right. This was the third defence of 10, wasn't it? The 154-pound division. He'd go on a bit of a tear through 91 and 92. Maurice Blocker and Meldrick Taylor would be the kind of standout performances. And I think, Matt, interesting, you don't see as much of this these days as was absolutely the norm back in the 80s, the 90s in particular, turn of the millennium. And that is future fights or future fighters appearing on the same card. And that was absolutely almost standard procedure, particularly stateside back in that particular time. Meldrick Taylor on the card, he would win by split decision. And same Meldrick Taylor, who'd lost, of course, controversially to Chavez the year before, but he would meet Meldrick Taylor in the next year or so as well. So putting fighters together on the same card, so fans and television audiences get to see them, and then you whet the appetite for what's coming up. You don't quite see so much of that anymore, and that's probably because of, I would say, mainly the stretch in broadcasting these days. Probably a bit of the sanctioning bodies, but I think it's mainly because you've got more media outlets rather than being able to control, say, the narrative in some of those individual fighters.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it was an interesting little snapshot mid-fight. I think what was it, between rounds 5 and 6, that you go to Meldrick Taylor, who is all ready for his main event performance in kind of, as soon as that fight's over, he's going to be going into the ring, and he's being asked for his analysis of the Norris Curry fight mid-round, and asked, are you going to fight Terry Norris in the future? And of course he did, and gave a good account of himself for a while. But Norris was just supersonic at that point, stopped Meldrick Taylor in 4 rounds. It was a leap too far for Meldrick Taylor. And in the same way that I've just been talking about what was the fight that ruined ruined Donald Curry. I think it was the fight against Terry Norris that ruined Meldrick Taylor. I think that pounded the last of him, the last of a really good fighter out of him. I know Julio Cesar Chavez was an incredibly damaging fight that played its part, but the loss to Terry Norris was really when the last time we were excited about seeing Meldrick Taylor getting into the ring. And something else, and this is a bit dark, but I couldn't help but think about the fate of Terry Norris, of Donald Curry, of Meldrick Taylor. 3 young men on this night, and all of them would fall foul to the degeneration of their brains as a consequence of this harrowing, brutal sport.
Yeah, absolutely right. To reflect on that, and once again, a reminder to go and read Tris Dixon's book Damage if you can. So interesting, informative, and important. So go and have a look at that. I'd slightly different reading on holiday this time. I had quite an eclectic mix this time. Normally it's like sports and drugs in sport and boxing books all the way, but I went for a slightly different look. So I did start reading Ring Theory by William Detloff, which is quite interesting. It's mainly excerpts from his writing across the years in a similar style to sort of McIlvanney and boxing. Yeah, it's quite interesting. He's a pretty good writer without being Hugh McIlvanney, but then nobody is. But I'll tell you what's really interesting about that book, Matt, is that there are so many effectively pieces that they're not ring reports. They're not on the night ring reports, but they are reflections on after or before. But I tell you, it's really rare that you get so many boxing pieces that stand the test of time in that way when you're commenting on something at that particular time. It's rare for it to still have weight and ballast and make sense 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. And his do. So he makes so many good points and they still stand up and you think, wow, yeah, spot on. That is right on the money. To do that in the moment at the time is not easy. So talked about Big George's prescience, but actually Detloff in Ring Theory, really interesting in that regard. He's obviously perceptive, I think is the way I'd describe it.
He used to do. I mean, he was kind of one of those writers that I admired when I was reading all of these American magazines that I often reference, and I would thoroughly enjoy the way that he could articulate his thoughts on this wacky and wonderful sport. He also used to have a column that was on the much older version of the Ring website, and it would come out every single Monday, and I would be so excited to read that. And I remember being at university actually, and sending him an email and asking him for some advice in regards to how do I get into boxing journalism. And a few days later, imagine my joy when I open my inbox and there's an email from Bill Detloff. I'll never forget that. And I've messaged him and told him thank you. I'll never forget that. Yeah, probably only took him 10 minutes, but it's most certainly made my week.
Ah, fantastic. So it's worth a read, The Ring Theory by William Detloff. Another book I'd highly recommend is called States of Play by Miguel Delaney. It's all about football finances. It's about the Premier League, Champions League, and it's largely about the influence of golf, money, power, and influence on both football leagues and football politics and football administration. So that's States of Play, Miguel Delaney. I would highly recommend that. Extremely thorough and forensic, eye-opening, jaw-dropping in spells. Obviously, it links to the Manchester City ongoing thing regarding financial fair play rules, etc., etc. But also a bit about the kind of Saudi, Abu Dhabi, Qatar sort of conflicts over the years as well, or alliances as it may stand as well. So that's really interesting. I read one on the Vikings on a guy called Harold Haraldsson, who's sort of one of the last Vikings. That was fascinating. Fascinating. How history could have been different, Matthew, if he'd... I tell you, it tells you about those sort of periods about the Vikings. The more you read about that, or the more you watch about that, is the amount of history that is decided by big slices of luck or judgment. I mean, luck or judgment, good or bad, all over the place with those characters. And it was the sort of the Battle of Hastings could have been so different because he lost a battle at Stamford Bridge to the King of Wessex just before the Normans came over. And really, the main reason he lost that is because he'd left half his men watching the ships, and they decided so they could march quicker to do it without their armor on. So a couple of daft decisions. Otherwise, he might have quite well have won that battle, and then he would have faced the Normans, or he and the Normans might have carved up England between themselves, and we would have had a very, very different history. But anyway, so that was quite interesting as well. That was my holiday reading. I think in 1923, Ned Boulting's sort of book on an old piece of cycling memorabilia. That's quite interesting as well. That was a good read. And Beryl, Britain's greatest sports person that you've never heard of, probably. Beryl Burton, who was just basically a tour de force in late 50s, 60s, 70s British cycling. She used to beat the men. British and world champion repeatedly. Beryl Burton. It's a book called Beryl. That was good by Jeremy Wilson? Really good read, that, actually. That's a story you've never heard of, but you probably should, because she's like Daley Thompson, Chris Boardman, Chris Froome, all of them thrown into one. She's unbelievable. So yeah, good story. So there's some recommended reading for you, because you've got a holiday coming up, haven't you? So
I have in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, is it a week? No, a week on Friday. I'll go over to Greece, go to Corfu. So yeah, and I will be attempting to replicate your existence. Really, I just want to be sitting by the pool, reading, bit of food, bit of drink, not worrying about a thing. It's been a bit of a year so far, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Several glasses of mythos. Some souvlaki, some beef stafado, lamb cleftico. Get it down you. You'll love it. Right, anyway, he'll be back next week. So will I. Hopefully so will you. Tell your friends. Support, follow, and all the usual channels. Enhance our chances in this tough game. And we'll speak to you again next time. Bye for now.